You need to understand something before we start. The people who did this, investigators knew who they were. The community knew who they were. Some of the witnesses knew who they were. And yet, for over 4 decades, no one was ever charged. This isn't a story about mystery. It's a story about what happens when a system decides a crime is easier to bury than to solve. April 11, 1981, Keddie, California. Population not enough to matter. Distance from the nearest city enough to disappear.
Like and subscribe.
Keddie wasn't a town, it was a decision. A cluster of rental cabins in the Sierra Nevada mountains, built for workers kept by people who needed somewhere cheap and quiet. No real main street, no real plan, just structures between trees, connected by gravel and low expectations. Sue Sharp, 36, had moved here with her 5 kids, fresh out of a divorce, starting over. Cabin 28 wasn't a dream, it was a step. Her oldest, John, was 15, already the kind of kid who watched out for the others. Sheila, 14, Tina, 12, Rick, 10, and a baby. That night, a Friday, Sheila headed out to a neighbor's for a sleepover. Dana Wingate, 17, was hanging around. He did that sometimes, close enough to be family. Nobody thought anything of it. Nobody had a reason to. The TV was on, people talked, and night fell. And somewhere in those hours, something shifted. There's a reason investigators and journalists have spent 40 years on this case. Not because the evidence is unclear, but because what it tells you is almost too specific to ignore. No forced entry. The door wasn't kicked in. The locks weren't broken. Whoever walked into cabin 28 that night either had access or didn't need to force their way in. Sue Sharp was bound, restrained at the wrists. John and Dana bound together back to back. That detail matters. You don't accidentally bind 2 people back to back. That's a choice, a method. It's a plan. 2 weapons were used, a hammer, a knife. Not 1, 2. Different tools, different moments, both deliberate. In a back room, 2 boys slept through all of it. Rick Sharp, Justin, a young visitor. They were left alive, also a choice. And Tina, 12 years old, was gone. Not injured and left behind. Taken. Someone walked out of that cabin with a child and walked into the dark. Sheila Sharp came back the next morning just after sunrise. The door was open. That's what she saw first. A small detail, the kind you explain away in the moment. She stepped inside. Her mother was on the floor. Her brother, Dana, still covered, arranged. And here's the thing about those blankets. Investigators noted it. Someone had covered the bodies. Not to hide them. The scene was clearly visible. But as an act of something, ritual, guilt, control. Whatever it means, it's not the act of a panicked stranger. And in the back room, Rick, still asleep, and Justin, still asleep. 2 children breathing. one child missing. Sheila ran, called for help, and the investigation that would go nowhere for decades began. Here's where the story gets harder to tell and harder to hear. Two names surfaced almost immediately. Martin Smart. He lived nearby. He knew the family. In the aftermath, he spoke about the crime in ways that unsettled investigators. He described details he shouldn't have known. At one point, he claimed he'd had a dream that mirrored the crime with precision that felt less like coincidence and more like confession. John Bo Boubeday, also nearby, also connected. Evidence circled both men. Witnesses placed them in proximity. Timelines bent around them. But here's what didn't happen. No charges. Evidence was collected, then went missing. Reports were filed, then sealed. Witnesses spoke, and then went quiet. Plumas County was a small place with small resources and, some would argue, small motivation to push certain threads. The case didn't collapse. It was allowed to stall. Years passed, and then in 1984, Tina was found. Not near Keddie, miles away. Her skull and other remains recovered with items that shouldn't have been there. What that meant for the timeline, for the suspects, for the case, investigators refused to say publicly. The distance confirmed she had been transported, which meant someone had a car, had a plan, had time, and was never asked to answer for it. Cabin 28 was demolished in 2004. The physical evidence gone. Some of the key witnesses gone. Martin Smart gone. Died in 2020 before any charges. But here's what didn't disappear. The records, the testimonies, the inconsistencies that never got resolved. And a renewed investigation opened again in recent years by Plumas County that suggests the case is not officially over. 3 people were murdered in that cabin. 1 child was taken and killed somewhere else. 2 boys survived and have lived with it ever since. And the people closest to the truth either never spoke or weren't made to. And that's not a mystery without answers. That's a failure, a specific documentable failure. The question this case leaves you with isn't who did it. The question is, what does it take, and who does it take for a crime to finally matter?
Like and subscribe.